Morning, everyone.
Morning, Tom.
Welcome to winter in New England. I'm going to call to order the February 7, 2025 meeting of the Economic Development Commission, and welcome everybody.
We have Phil.
And do we have Phil in
The waiting room.
There he is, okay. Why don't we? Can you hear us, or?
Morning, Phil.
With us, Phil?
Good morning. Can you hear me okay?
We
Yes.
can. Welcome.
Thank you. Sorry to be joining remote.
That's all right, and we literally just started the meeting, so. First item on the agenda will be the approval of the minutes, the draft minutes of the January 3rd meeting. I'll entertain a motion to do so.
So moved.
Yep. Andy moved it. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Jacob, second. Any corrections or comments or suggestions? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Next, we'll let Sean tell us what's been going on.
Quite a bit. Thank you, Tom. So we had the tourism summit last week, I guess, early last week, and those folks are really ramping up. There were a lot of conversation about increased airport activity. There were some presentations regarding outdoor recreation and marketing around that. The state is really pushing that hard, and now that we have a rail trail, we're kind of in that game. It's not just the North Country and the Lakes region. So more to come on that. One thing we did do from the city standpoint is let the folks know about construction, and so I'll share this with the group. The plan for Vaughn Mall is to work underneath and complete the things that need to be done underneath Vaughn Mall, starting in the spring as soon as we can, hopefully April. Then it'll be put back together, and then there'll be a design that needs to be worked through and approved, and the top side of Vaughn Mall will be fixed in the spring of 2026. So that was just good to let the folks know who are downtown or focused on tourism that that's going to be happening. The Maplewood Bridge, if you haven't heard, be closed to vehicular traffic starting in late March, early April, with a plan to have it reopened to vehicular traffic in mid-June. So hopefully that stays on schedule, and that's a non-issue for our high season. The intersection of Maplewood, Islington, and Congress, there are 3 of those corners will be reworked, basically to complete that, to finish the complete street process of doing everything we need to do, underground, above ground, recurbing, and making it as friendly as possible. And then just a couple of updates. The private development at 2 Russell, which is the Sheraton parking lot, is scheduled to start in mid-March. So there will be a plan to understand what's going to happen there. And as always, our DPW will be deeply involved to make sure there's as little impact as possible to residents and businesses. Similarly, you've got 53 Green Street and potentially 1 Congress that'll be starting up at some point. So more of a reminder that we have 1 construction season here in New Hampshire, and hopefully we didn't dampen too many of their spirits on that. I did share the Collier's commercial real estate reports, just reminding us that there's really just no industrial space. I'm looking at you, Andy, right? Of course, we did get a call on the 3rd floor where I hang out with the inspections team. There's someone who would like to start a trampoline business, adventure center. So they need 25,000 square feet and 20-foot ceilings. And she was just shocked that we didn't have anything available. But I'll leave it at that. But speaking of inquiries, a couple of things have come in the last couple of weeks. One is there's a gentleman with a tall ship, 82-foot schooner, looking for dockage. So if I can pull that off, I'll be pretty impressed with myself.
For a visit, or?
No, well, he wants to come and be here for a portion of the summer, and then he talked about one time he works with students. It's a kind of a semester at sea type of thing. It's a educational process. And but he talked about one time they were someplace where they did a haunted ship, So, of course, I shared with him our Halloween parade link and how important that was to us. He liked that idea of being here through Halloween. So we'll see how that goes. In addition to that, you've got a new bicycle rental, e-bike rental service that's excited about our rail trail, looking to set up operations here. We've got folks looking for retail space. We've got folks looking desperately for restaurant space, small restaurant space, Bob, not big. And just yesterday had a conversation with a bicycle sharing service, which is pretty interesting, which I've asked for more information to share with the city staff and with EDC. And lastly, there's people interested in looking at the Portsmouth Brewery, which I think is good news. We'll see what comes of that. Here in City Hall, the parking study recommendations were submitted to City Council on the 3rd, so they have those. You can see those. The first couple of pages is kind of the grid of what was recommended immediately, short-term and long-term, and then there's about, another 100 pages of information if you're interested in that. The Market Square Master Plan, there's a meeting next week of the advisory group, so I plan to be there. Hopefully Ann and Everett will be there as well. According to Peter Britz, the bike ped plan will be completed in the next few weeks, and recommendations will be made to City Council. So all this, as you know, we have a cultural plan and we have a climate action plan. All of these plans are going to roll up to really inform the citywide master plan, which we talked about at our last meeting. That's in the final stages of refining the scope of the project and moving to a contract. And there will be an advisory group, and EDC will have an invitation to be on that group. The last item I have is CRM is ready for prime time. I have introductory email blasts ready to go out. I'm breaking it out by location and basically fixed all the challenges with the first pilot. From there, once we get ourselves, at least my office, introduced to everyone and let them know there's this channel, then we can start looking at some of these mini surveys we've talked about, and the CRM already allows for that. So I'm hoping to work with the group on small 2 to 3, 4 question surveys. They can be targeted, or they can be sent to everyone, and when they come back in, the tool will sort them by industry, so we can start to see trends. That's the goal, and
That's exciting.
it's pretty exciting.
It's been a journey for you.
But yeah, so I'll leave it at that. That's my report, Tom.
That's great. A couple questions. On the CRM, will you be able to target the questions to trade
Yeah.
groups?
Yes.
Okay.
Or by location. So
I understand the location, yeah.
By industry sector, yes. So healthcare, right?
And the person looking to do the trampoline thing, they ought to call Alex down on West Road.
Already did.
Oh.
It's not for sale.
Okay. All right, and call Renee for the tall ship.
Yeah, oh, right, yes, thank you.
Okay, any questions of Sean? Excellent, lots going on. On the Vaughan Mall, is that going to extend into the parking lot area, or is that just going to be what used to be the street, Vaughan Street?
I believe it's just the Vaughan Mall,
As far as I understand, it's just the Vaughan Mall, not the Worth lot.
not the Worth lot,
Is it getting a facelift
in 2026.
2026. There's a lot of work we have to do underneath.
after the work's done?
Primary utility.
Is there a plan for that somewhere?
It'll be part of the discussion when they start designing and constructing underneath, so there'll be input for that.
There was a committee a number of years ago now that studied the Worth lot, including
Right.
some of the Vaughan Mall. And part of it was making actually a little extension into the Worth lot for a performance type of little place that would be for the Vaughan Mall.
Yeah, that's the reason I asked the question.
Yeah.
And it went over into the Bridge Street lot as well.
Yeah,
Yeah. That's sitting on a nice shelf somewhere.
yeah, it is.
Lots of great ideas. Okay. All right. Ben's not here, so we're going to jump to the city council
All
update.
right, so Ben stole some of the thunder, but that's all right. There wasn't a lot of thunder. I think that a nice thing has been that I think the last two meetings, we've gotten out
At a reasonable
at a
hour.
reasonable hour, 9:30, something like that. Yeah, so it's great. There are a couple things of interest, not necessarily, well, I guess, for everybody. The mayor proclamation for Black History Month and reaffirmed the city of the open door and its inclusiveness, and I thought that's an important thing to do right now. We did, I think Sean mentioned the elderly and disabled. Did you mention that? Tax credits. We raised the rates for the single-person income of 55,534. For married couple, 72,804 is the maximum that they can have for income, and 500,000 is the asset limit for being qualified. All these numbers are pretty much at the top of the list for communities in New Hampshire. So we're doing the right thing. So I think that's all good. I'm not sure what the actual impact, I think the actual impact of the, let's say, a median household on taxes would be about $60. Approve a bond from the, what is it called? It's for the replacement of galvanized water pipe, which can have lead in it. And there's a lot of that still in Portsmouth. And some of it is unidentified. But that was a $3.5 million grant from the, I forget, the
That's from
state.
the State Revolving Loan Fund, and
Revolving Loan Fund. So it,
if I can add some color to that,
Yeah.
every community is required to do an inventory and work to replace lines with lead or galvanized product in them. And so not only did we ask for a loan for the city's lines, but we've also extended that to residents. So in the same way we will get 71% forgiveness for the work we have to do, residents whom we are helping to identify what they've got now, they will have they will have access to that loan fund. So most communities are just taking care of themselves and not ignoring that benefit to the residents. So
How do you possibly determine whether you have a lead pipe or?
you
You
go
have
and
to
do an
dig it up.
inventory. Well, and the city will help you with an inspection if you take us up on that offer. And we are in the process of literally boring in locations where the material is unknown. So kudos to the water department for going to get the money and extending the availability of the money to residents. It's 174 private lines, so it's not a big number of private lines that are out there, but something like 2,700 for public lines. So we have a good deal of time to inventory and fix them. So that's where we're starting.
and it has to be fixed by
2037 or something?
37, yeah, we have some time to do it, but sooner the better.
Now, that's talking about a lot of construction going on
Yeah.
in the city.
Yep.
But I assume that would be spread out over years, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
We also amended the zoning, or had actually a first reading of zoning on dimensional and intensity standards. This came about from, talks about fences, for one thing, and the ability to install an outbuilding, a shed, a garden shed, or what have you, without going through a heavy approval process, so that's good. We all thought it was good. And then I was going to mention the parking study too, which is, I have not read it. It is very detailed, very intense, but there is a good summary at the end, so.
Can I add 4 more bullets real quick?
You may have as many as you like.
The city had a clean audit with our outside auditor, CLA, so that was good. That was at the second January meeting. We officially transitioned to .gov. We are now PortsmouthNH.gov for purposes of giving people a sense that they could trust the domain. There's a lot more, and Sarah probably knows about this, a lot more security to a .gov. We, in the same way, we went after proactively some funding to right a wrong with the lead and the galvanized service lines. We are good users of SRF funding, and so as such, the state approached us and said they had some additional capacity, and could we use an additional $5 million, I think it's $5.2 million, when we go to upgrade the Pease wastewater treatment plant. We'd already been approved for $20 million, and they asked if we could use another $5 million, to which we said, yes, please. And so it's great that they think of us when they have excess capacity, because they know we can use it, and so as such, the council supported that additional borrowing, which will be a huge savings to the ratepayers. And the last thing I want to remind folks of is, as of this week, you can now register your motor vehicle and register for the resident discount for Park Mobile at the same time, in the same place, in the building here. You don't have to go to the parking garage necessarily anymore. So that's a big deal. That was some technology in the making.
It's great.
Thanks.
Any questions of city manager?
Mr. Chair, if I may, I'd love to pinch hit for Ben on a couple of key items
That'd be
here
great.
that cross over to my office. So Art Around Town is tonight, if you have any inclination to enjoy the winter even more. Thursday, February 13th, is a ribbon cutting at lunchtime at Howlin' Wolf. So if you haven't been to the Howlin' Wolf in the old Customs House, 11:30 to 1:30, you can say you're going to the ribbon cutting and try their food. On, excuse me, Wednesday, February 19th, Wednesday the 19th, 8 to 9:30 is the 2025 Economic Outlook Breakfast, sponsored by the Chamber. Bob will be on a panel. I will be there. Shanti Wolf, our Director of Inspections, will be on a panel. We'll hear from someone at the national level, at the state level, and then break it down to local. That's an annual event on Wednesday, February 19th. And the last one here is the Local Love, which is the third Thursday of every month. It's starting to gain some traction. We may be getting a press release on that, and hopefully some greater coverage so our retailers can leverage that visibility. So thanks. And that's all on the sheet there, but I wanted to call out a couple.
Okay.
Ben would want me to.
Do you know how many merchants are now participating in that?
I believe it could be 30, Local Love.
That's good.
Yeah, they've really come together. This will be the fourth or maybe fifth event. They committed to doing it for a year, and now we're trying to get some more press, certainly in these slower retail times.
Great.
Thank you.
I meant to ask you this when you were giving your earlier report. Has there been any indication that the cruise lines are coming back this summer? Or?
If you look at their schedule, yes. They had, I think it was maybe 8 port visits. And again, as I tell everybody, it's subject to change because they put them out there, they market it. If they don't get enough bookings, they may not come. Because, yeah, so we'll see how that goes. I'll just, on an aside, I work with the Propeller Club here in Portsmouth. They reached out to American Cruise Lines to ask them to come speak at a dinner. It was hard to get anybody to respond. So it appears they're going through a bit of a growth spurt, which can cause either turnover or inward focus, but we're going to continue to be in touch with them to understand more about their plans.
But individual customers, so to speak, don't pick the cities to visit.
No, you're right. I think, but they can choose to, like, for last year, they had 6 original port visits, and then they only ended up with 4. So I don't know how they move people around at cruises or not enough people have signed up, they're not going to do the entire cruise. I don't know if that's how it works, but it can change.
Great. Okay. All right. And let me ask you, Vince, is the city council going to adopt any more goals for this biennium, or are you relying on the ones that?
We're continuing basically with our goals. Housing, environment, I don't have them in my head right now.
No, I have the written ones.
Yeah.
So, but you're staying with the ones that were adopted at the beginning of 2024? Okay. That answers the question on the to-do list that Jen was kind enough to prepare. All right, so let's talk about our workshop, and let me begin by thanking Jen for doing such a great job of literally putting the whole thing together, in spite of the fact that she was working in Connecticut for the 4 days leading up to the event. And I don't know if everybody's had an opportunity to look at the outline that was sent around earlier in the week. So what I'd like to do is just sort of open it up for thoughts and comments on what the people thought the experience went, and thoughts or comments on the notes and the action items at the end of the notes. And we look forward to putting together our plan for this year. Don't be shy.
I thought it summed up pretty well what we're doing. Sometimes you think, well, we're not really doing anything. Then you look down and, oh yeah, we're doing this, and this. So we did get a fair amount, or we do get a fair amount accomplished. It's nice to be able to try and focus, on what we're doing and how we can do it better. So I think for me, I think being on the same page is really good, not only just this committee, but with the city council. And I've always felt that's important.
I see, Mr. Chair, I think Phil wants to speak. He unmuted.
Okay.
I don't know. As far as defining economic development,
Hold on a minute, Phil. Let Bob finish his. Can you hear Bob's comment?
Yes.
Okay. Go ahead, Bob.
does Phil want to speak? 'Cause
He
I
will,
was-
but you've got the floor.
That's okay. I was just kind of rambling on.
Yeah, no.
Go ahead, Phil.
Go ahead, Phil.
Thanks, Bob. Yep, no, just well summarized, and obviously I missed a fair portion of it, but I thought the notes that went out were very clear and concise, and I thought very helpful that we had the discussion as a group, what we don't do. I think it was helpful, and thanks to Jen, and definitely agree that was well organized and constructed, and good to have some key takeaways on how to orient our time moving forward, and look forward to engaging on what I see I was signed up for. So thank you guys for taking me up on my assertion at the front end of the meeting. So good to get the group together to kick off the year. So thank you, Tom and Sarah, for making sure that happened.
Okay. Welcome, Ben. You gave a great presentation. I'm sure it was good. You were channeled through Sean, so. So we're right now discussing, we just started into the review and discussion of the workshop and the notes and the action plan going forward. Who else?
I can jump in. So again, I want to echo everybody's thanks for Jen for organizing it. I think we spent a lot of time aligning on the different perspectives of what we think we do and who we support, which I think was important, and also explain some of the different entry points that we brought to the workshop as well. I did not follow up on my action item, which is to connect with Joe Kelly, so I will do that. But I'm also interested in the work that we need to do to support our delegates to the master plan working session, and I'm wondering what kind of a format that would be. Would it be a position paper or a working committee, or, you know, how do we formalize that?
Yeah, that's the next step I want to talk about. Any other thoughts on?
No.
Okay.
I'll do a quick echo of what both Sarah and Phil mentioned. One of my favorite parts of the retreat was when the Post-its were going away or getting consolidated.
That's part.
And Phil kind of mentioned too, my favorite part of the summary was what we do not do. I thought there was a lot of, I don't know, nuggets in that that made sense, and it also kind of reminded me of that part of the discussion of the retreat. So for me, the summary is a great written representation of all the summarizing we actually did in the retreat. And that was those two things were my favorite parts of the retreat, was the consolidating things down and identifying what we do not do.
Great. Jen, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I'd be interested in your observations as sort of the facilitator, as we talked a lot before the session, and we
Yeah.
talked a little afterwards, and your own experience. And
Yeah. I don't know if anyone else facilitates regularly, but it is definitely, I was reminded of the challenge of being a facilitator of the group I participated in. So that was a unique challenge for me. But I think we got where we needed to get. I think we set ourselves up with a focus. It seemed like, the primary focus is going to be how do we really dig into the other stuff happening, mostly the master plan, which, is a huge deal, right? And so I think eliminating some of the noise and some of the curiosities or uncertainties helped us to, get to the focus of where we can really put our resources. And for me, as a new member and as a facilitator, I thought that was a good outcome. Yeah, I'm just excited to see how we continue that focus and what kind of influence on action we can have. I'm really itching for action off of this, so.
Okay. Well, let's talk about the next steps then. So, both Ann and Andrew have agreed before we went into the workshop that they were willing to continue on as chairs of the working groups. It seems like our energy really is going to be devoted to what we can do with the master plan. Are having two working groups the best way to accomplish that? Do we kind of, as those of you who probably downloaded, I was lucky enough to get a hard copy, but it's 270 pages of action items and notes, and so there's lots there to digest and figure where we can make contributions. There's only a small section called economic development, but if you look, and I haven't looked at the whole thing word for word, but if you go through economic development, it's in every section. So thoughts on how you think we might approach this most efficaciously?
I'll throw out a suggestion as we're nearing, we're in the midst of developing a scope of work with the consultant. Maybe it makes sense when we have that scope of work done or close to done, you invite the planning board chair here and the planning and sustainability director, because those two, Rick Chelman and Peter Britz, will be really instrumental in guiding the process. And by the letter of the law, the work can be done only by the planning board, or in my world where I come from, you have a big steering committee that represents a lot of different factions of the community. So I think as a group, you explain to the planning board chair and the planning department how you want to be involved. That could be maybe not the March meeting, but certainly the April meeting.
Okay, so when will the RFP go out?
Oh, the RFP's out. We've selected a consultant, and we reported that it's UTL. They have several bases around the country, but Boston is the closest one. And some of us have familiarity with the members of UTL, so we're really excited about this. So our legal team is developing the scope of work. We're almost done.
Okay.
So maybe March, if there isn't a ton on the March agenda, that could be the opportunity to bring in Rick Chalman and Peter Britz.
Could be. Yep.
Okay. Bob?
Yeah, just wondering about the process and of the master plan. Is there a format that it needs to be in for the state, or how does that work? Like certain
I'm
things that
less
have to be
familiar with New
addressed?
Hampshire master plan, so I'll let Peter and Rick talk about that. Rick is super familiar with that, so he
Okay.
can talk about process, and we can talk about format. But then
Yeah.
there are some things we can do outside of the restrictions of or the requirements that we'll want to
I'm
do.
just not that familiar with the plan and how it gets to the final plan, so. If anyone else is, please feel free to enlighten us. But,
Other than it's necessary if you want to keep your zoning ordinances.
yeah.
But that's a good point, Mr. Chair. Out of the master plan effort will come recommendations to amend the zoning ordinance. And typically, if you're doing things in sequence, you do a master plan and then you do either a rewrite of your zoning or a huge amount of technical corrections to your zoning ordinance. So that would be the larger process.
So we'll have an opportunity to have one person on that steering committee. Is that what your expectation is?
I would ask that of the chair and the planning board director, but that would also be my expectation.
Okay. So to answer someone's earlier question, I think it's important for the entire commission to be part of the analysis and not to lay this on the back of one person. And I really see the person who is lucky enough to be on the steering committee being a conduit for our collective thoughts on the plan, and as opposed to simply being a participant who comes back and reports to us. And if that makes sense, the question is, what's the best way to accomplish that, other than having us sit around as a group going through the master plan and essentially repeating what the steering committee has done.
Well, I don't know, how was it done last time?
Before my time.
Yeah,
I don't even know if the
that's why
EDC had a role in it last time.
I don't think we did.
So what, 2015? Was it 2015 or
Maybe.
Yeah,
I
it
think it was
would've been-
before I was on the.
So probably 2014.
Commission.
2014?
15. You're going to.
Yeah, I have a few questions and a few thoughts. So my first question is, Karen, what you said, it sounds like the kickoff, in essence, of our involvement here wouldn't happen until April, March, April-ish?
Right, because we are still
Officially,
working
right.
to contract with the consultant, so but I'm thinking earlier to get your request and your expectations out there to the chair would be good.
Yeah, well, so I'm thinking about like that, what the time frame we have then before the actual active involvement. We've got a couple of months, it sounds like. And so my curiosity is, in those couple of months, does this team have the conversation and generate a unique viewpoint on what economic development in Portsmouth means? Because I think that was one thing that leaving the retreat felt like the biggest question mark is, when we say economic development, what do we really mean? And what does good economic development look like in the city of Portsmouth? And so I almost wonder if maybe us, as one idea for how we prepare ourselves for involvement, perhaps that's one way to go, to have a look at defining what we really mean by that. The second piece I was thinking that might be helpful is to scope out our assumptions as a team around, I don't know, just asking the questions and uncovering blind spots and trying to figure out what are the things that are, baked in that we just don't even think about and as a group, so if we're doing it in silos on our own as individuals, those assumptions continue. If we have the conversation, we can make them explicit. So I thought perhaps that's an opportunity. And then I thought the final opportunity could be to chunk the master plan up for, various people to take different portions of it. And then we create like buckets of like, what, so what, now what, or something like that for each section. Like, what were the 3 to 5 bullet points for that piece that everyone should know about, to familiarize ourselves with what has been and where we are. Why is it important in the context of economic development? And so now where do we see our entry point? What's the point of action to bring it forward? So you asked for like, how could we sort of chunk this out without it being an activity of everyone just going reading the master plan? Those are the 3 things that came to my brain to kind of bring it to life and bring it into a group setting for work or potential subgroup settings.
Okay.
Not saying it's right, just throwing it out there for thought.
No, it is, I mean, one of the things that I had thought about was literally splitting up the prior plan and having maybe 2 people take different sections and focus just on that and come back through the whole. My expectation would be that the process that the consultant and the planning board will use is to take different subject areas, just as the plan is in subject areas, and have public hearings and sessions spread out over the balance of the year. Is that-
Yeah, I don't want to speak to that because I will let Rick and Peter talk to that. I'm not part of negotiating the scope, but I was part of the review, didn't vote in the review period, but I saw what they submitted, and I was encouraged by that. They will do some,
Yeah.
something like that.
So there will be a sequence
Yes.
of topics, so there would be a value to dividing it in, consumable, slices of the pie, knowing that they're going to be inserted.
Yeah, and Tom, if I could add, because I was part of the group, there's a full expectation, or a very strong expectation, that the consultant will understand and review and dig into all of the plans that have already been created, as well as the previous master plan,
Yeah. That's a really good point. We're handing them a great body of work.
as a way to ground themselves on how to move forward, and I think that has an impact on the scope. They don't have to build everything from the ground up, right? We have all these plans that are in place, whether it's bike ped, climate action, right? So, and we have the previous master plan. So they have a lot of information that they don't have to go out and find primary sources for. And then it's a question of that look forward, right? The 10-year look forward, and getting the public input and getting input from staff and city council and others about what does Portsmouth look like in 10 years.
Yeah, but the one thing that doesn't exist is an economic development master plan.
You're correct.
Just as an example, I mean, in anticipation of the workshop, I shopped around at other cities in New Hampshire just to see what other cities were doing. And so, for instance, the City of Concord has an economic development master plan that's almost as thick as this.
Wow.
So they won't have the benefit of that. So that's part of what I think our role is, to fill that gap. Not to develop our own master plan, but to make sure that economic development concepts or aspirations are baked into the new plan.
Would it be a section you're thinking of, maybe in there?
Don't know. I mean, as I pointed out, there is sort of in the back of the current plan an economic development action page with a dozen items that were recommended for the 10 years.
Yeah.
That's separate from the different sections, housing, et cetera. So it could be a list of potential action items. It could be,
It's kind of hard to separate the two.
well,
Master plan.
Yeah, but
Economic development, if you figure economic development are the policies that drive the economy, then that's sort of filled with all of that stuff.
Oh, sure. And that's, I think that's the challenge of this group, is that, you know, you can do a cultural plan, and the first thing that people who are doing that are going to point to the economic impact of the arts
Right.
and culture in the community. So that does have economic development consequences. It's, you know, I think what makes us different than other city boards is that our focus is on that. And so I think one of the things we could be looking at is making sure that anytime you're looking at another topic, that it should be, the economic output of that should be addressed as well, in whichever direction.
We could either request from the selected firm or develop an economic framework for the different sections. So as they're going through thinking about the arts, education, housing, there are certain aspects that we want to make sure, or we want to ask questions about as part of that development. So I don't know if the consultants already have that. We don't necessarily need to make something up if it exists, but that might be a lens in.
Do we know if the consultants will generate sort of a current state, like to sort of say, taking all of these plans and like, almost like a brief on this is where we are right now? Like, will they provide that snapshot as a starting point?
There typically is an existing conditions kind of part of the report, but they'll give you the full set, and it also typically comes with 8 or so sections: natural resources, historic preservation, economic development, land use, water resources, things like that. So there are elements, but then there's also a baseline set of here's what we know to be true, into which they will weave all those plans that have been done, which saves on their scope of work, to be honest. They can focus on other things.
So does that make sense as an approach, or does somebody think there's a better way of doing it?
Can we re-clarify what the approach is?
Okay. Well, so I think, sort of as action plan, then I think I guess, work with Karen, but I'll reach out to Rick Chelman and Peter Britz to try to solidify our role going forward. I don't know who should reach out to the consultant.
I'll help you.
Okay. And maybe we can follow up on the,
We're assuming they even want our input.
They do.
They do.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
don't think they're going to say they don't want it.
And then we want to make sure we're on the same page with the planning board.
Well, yeah, then that's,
So that would be good
that's Rick Chelman.
Rick,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So, I mean, so the procedural point of view, we'll try to nail that down before we come back here in March. And, you know, what will the role, what will the timing be, that type of thing. And so then the second part of that, the substance, I think, it would be the idea that we divide the plan into segments and have small, you know, I'm always concerned about doing it in individuals in case somebody gets hung up at work or something, but if we had 2-person teams to tackle different sections, those people could do a deep dive and come back with recommendations for us to adopt as a whole, and then using our representative in the steering group, communicate those and try to get those incorporated into the plan. That's what I'm envisioning.
So you are, I mean, right now, basically, there's a page dedicated to economic development that is very general. But in the other sections, there are references to the Economic Development Commission or not?
Not to the commission, no. So let me just,
Or to the
what I'm
ideas
saying is,
of-
at the end of the report, there is,
Page 211.
well, the economic development is on 209, but there are a series of, it's called the vision section, if you will. So it lists action items. So, for instance, there's a whole page of action items for land use. Some of those obviously are economic development ones. There's one for housing, economic development, natural resources, transportation, recreation, community facilities, and cultural and historic resources. So some of these items we've already touched on, like transportation, so we're not limited to just this one page. In fact, if you look at this one page in the last plan, it's very timid, is the way I would describe it. You know, it's just sort of aspirational. We need to encourage businesses to do this, that type of thing.
So would it be better to have input on each of the sections and split the economic development ideas throughout the plan, or have it in one section?
Well, I was envisioning the former, assuming that this represents a typical master plan in the sections.
If this is in PDF, this is a fantastic job for ChatGPT to ask it questions about economic development. We look at the output and we determine and validate whether it's accurate or not. But there are tools that will help us summarize this.
And we
I
have
couldn't
just
find the
first-
PDF. Didn't you say there was a PDF
John
file?
can send it out to everybody.
I did.
Okay.
Yeah.
I
You
can
did.
resend it.
There you go.
Yeah, well, when you look at it, it has this book-like thing that you have to
Yeah.
leaf through.
Or
But you can, on the left-hand side, there's a
Oh,
place where
okay.
you can download the
the
PDF.
PDF. Yeah.
Oh, so I can do it myself.
Yeah.
I believe I sent you a link, but that's okay. You were probably in Florida.
See, I learn a lot at these meetings.
I will come to your house and read it to you, Bob.
Every night, push you to sleep. Well, I don't know if some of us have the capability of using the chat.
I'm happy to give it a go and send out the results.
But to answer Vince's question, then, I think we can talk about that as sort of stage two, but in the initial stage, I think we should, this is the baseline for whatever's going to happen next, and so we should analyze each section from the standpoint of economic development, and then come back with, what our recommendations would be. So each section has things like goals, and what I was pointing to in the back is just the action items. So for instance, if you're talking about arts and culture, we could be talking about how we're trying to promote that as a regional center or something like that, or you could do the same with, different businesses and stuff like that, all of which would be within its own section. At the end of the day, if we really thought it was worthwhile, we could ask that the master plan included an entire section on economic development. I'm just not sure.
Maybe that's a question for our guests to talk about the planning
Right.
process. So I'm thinking maybe the next meeting is we speak with the chairs if they're available about Economic Development Commission participation, and we've done some research between now and then on the existing plan, and then the next month would be coming together with recommendations for the kinds of things we would want to see in the master plan that are economic development related.
Exactly. Does that answer your question?
More or less. Yeah, I mean, I just wonder, almost every section should have at least a thought of how that section impacts economic development.
So sort of an impact statement, like state statutes have one?
I'm sorry?
Like an impact statement?
Could be, yeah.
All right. Other thoughts? Are we heading down the wrong path?
I have a thought that's more detailed, but One thing that I've found challenging in similar processes is keeping track of the calendar. Sounds like the calendar doesn't start ticking until April or so, but if the liaison or the person from the EDC that's on the steering committee can, if I could add that to their, whoever that is, their task, because just looking on City of Portsmouth website and seeing when the meeting is and what the agenda is doesn't really tell you what's going on. And then it'd be great if those subcommittees could then know if what their bucket is being addressed on that calendar item date. I spend a lot of time looking at my own calendar, and when I try to combine it with the city's calendar, I think the website's great, but if there was more description as to what was actually going on at each meeting, maybe it'd also be a tool to divide up attendance at the night meetings and the meetings that consultant is running and
Yep.
so on.
Okay. Well, my understanding is that the steering committee, once it's formed, will probably lay out a whole schedule
Yeah.
for the process. At least that's what some of the other committees have done.
Right.
And so whether that, will have the detail enough to say, this is when we're going to talk about cultural, this is when we're going
Right.
to, I don't know. But that, if we can get to that, once the committee is going, it will have a schedule, and it'll probably decide on which issues will be addressed, and then that will sort of inform us as to where we need to start and move quickly, and others, how we have more time. But, so then I guess what we ought to do today, so to keep the ball rolling, I'll work with Karen, initiate the contact with the planning board chair and the planning and sustainability director on those logistics of the steering committee, but we ought to start the process of having our little subgroups review the existing baseline, if you will, just to have familiarity with it. So we're not suddenly hustling in April to come up with a discussion for something that's going to be covered later that month. All right, so does anybody have how many people have had a chance to look at the current master plan?
I didn't get through the whole thing. Skipped it.
All right. Do you feel comfortable biting off a piece of it now, or would you prefer to send me your preferences and then I'll put something together and get it out to everybody?
Yeah. I would prefer that,
Okay?
personally. Or just assign them, if you want to assign them randomly.
Well,
That's fine.
I will do that, but I'd give people an opportunity if they have a special interest. I'm happy to
How
play
many
that.
sections are there, and how many?
Typically 8.
Yeah.
I'm doing that from memory.
Yeah, that's my question, is like which part of the content, because there's 5 themes. Are we looking at each, like are we looking at the themes? Are we looking at
It's typically by discipline, or
Yeah, there's a-
as Tom was reading off, economic development, recreation, education.
I didn't know.
Yeah,
so the focus areas, urban core, corridors, urban neighborhoods?
No.
No. So the way, again, I haven't looked at the whole thing, but it starts off with sort of, the planning themes are sort of goals like
Right.
vibrancy, diversity,
Yeah.
that type of
Authentic,
stuff.
connected, resilient, right. So,
Exactly.
so we're not divvying up the themes.
No, I don't think, no, I think it's
Okay.
when we get to the, and it's not geographically, because then there's a whole section on urban core, corridors,
Right.
neighborhoods, et cetera.
The focus areas.
Yeah.
It's the land use, it's the land use, housing, economic development, transportation, natural resources. Those are the ones you're talking about?
Yeah.
Recreation.
So
Facilities.
Where did
Any good report that's 200 pages, the last 10 that have all the meat.
the last 10?
Yeah.
All right,
So the implementation portion.
Yeah. So let's do this then. What I'd like to do is get out the assignments, if you will, by the end of next week. So if anybody has a particular interest in something, let me know by close of business on Wednesday. And if I don't hear from you, I'll assume you're interested in everything. If you say you really want to be on this and 5 other people want to be on that, I may say, sorry, you got to do this. But I'll divide it into groups of 2, and I'll rely on you to contact your teammate, so to speak, and figure out how you'll tackle it. But I simply ask you, look at the plan, come back at the next meeting with at least, not necessarily specific recommendations, but at least a knowledge of the issues, what we might be looking at as recommendations with respect to those. Again, I don't expect the detail within 30 days, but I'd like everybody to sort of have their expertise down. And so by the time we can get in here with the planning and the planning board chair and the planning director, we'll be ready to move quickly. Is that, everybody good with that?
When do you expect we would meet with the planning board?
Well, I'll try to communicate with them, and the idea will be to get them for the
Next meeting?
next meeting if they're ready. So conceivably, they could be ready to get up and rolling in March. So we want to be there at the beginning.
Yeah. March 7th is the next meeting,
Right.
EDC.
Thanks. All right. Is that a plan? It is now, so.
No objections.
That's why you're the chairman. Chairperson.
Is that why? Okay, all right, so we're going to set aside the working groups concept, because we're going to have 2-person working groups just to approach this. As we go down the line, if other issues come up, and we may also have concurrent working groups to deal with those. But I'm assuming that most of our work this year is going to be on the master plan. All right, any new business? Any old business? Anything at all?
See if Ben wants to add to Sean's Ben report.
It's hard to say because I don't know what he shared, but
I highlighted.
I will just mention that it's been a busy couple weeks, and I wanted to thank the city manager and Sean for joining us at the tourism summit that we hosted at the airport. A lot of people, most of the people attended that, had never been to that facility before, so that was quite nice to welcome that to them. Welcome them to that space. And then I'll also just mention on Wednesday of this week, we held Celebrate Her and celebrated the women business leaders in our community, and that was a really great sold-out event for lunch. And then on the 19th, we have the economic outlook, and we have somebody from UNH that's going to talk about tariffs, and that's a very hot topic right now. And in fact, we were part of a meeting with Senator Shaheen to talk about the impacts of the proposed tariffs with the businesses in the state of New Hampshire, and which is not good, to summarize that as succinctly as possible. So economic outlook on the 19th, 8 to 9:30 in the morning at the Atlantic Grill. Mr. Bob Marhethko is going to join us to talk about downtown, along with Shanti Wolf, to talk about downtown vacancy rates and kind of turning over the properties of downtown. And the editor of New Hampshire Business New Hampshire Magazine will join us to talk about state economic outlook. So, should be a good morning. I hope to see you there. That's all.
I will say that Sean did share with us the invitation to your house for cocktails tonight.
Yep.
So
Come on over.
pretty
Yep.
much everybody will be there.
Yep. Yep. come on down.
You were going to say something?
Show the
All right, well, I will entertain a motion to adjourn then.
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Ayes have it.